Terrapagos with the Terra Starstorm, it's actually stronger to use Terra Starstorm into a single target without terastallizing than it is to terastallize. But here it is, turn one of game one of our Masters Division Finals. That is the Fluttermane and Grimmsnarl to lead for Aurelien against the Rillaboom and the Raging Bolt. Fake out pressure for Patrick, but screen pressure for Aurelien.
And that's exactly why you need to lead the Rillaboom if you are concerned about Aurelien leading that Grimmsnarl. One thing about the Regulation G format is that it's very rare for games to last longer than the 8 turns that screens last when holding the light play. So if you can flinch it once, deal some damage, and put it into Grassy Glide range the next turn, there are no screens for the match.
Well, that's a big Moonblast coming out from the Fluttermane. Patrick is focusing down that Grimmsnarl to prevent any of those screens, just like you called out, Gabby. That Grimmsnarl is absolutely in Grassy Glide range, but would be a trade potentially for the Raging Bolt.
It would be a trade for the Raging Bolt, but I think that's a trade you are okay making, as the Raging Bolt is going to be doing neutral damage to a majority of Aurelien's team. The goal here is to ensure that Aurelien's defenses don't get higher than your own, so then you can match the pace of play. So this is a great defensive switch from Aurelien here, but this Iron Hand's is gonna take some damage for the trouble.
Yeah, the Iron Hands is gonna take some damage, but the Grassy Glide is not that terrible, and actually, Patrick made the reads! Went for the Grassy Glide and the Thunderclap, just barely not enough to pick up that KO. In exchange, the Fluttermane will pick up the KO on the Raging Bolt with that Moonblast. And now it is Aurelien who has the fake out pressure on that Iron Hands. Unless Patrick wants to bring in the second fake out user.
Instead, though, Calyrex Ice Rider making it onto the field, and just saying that Fluttermane is within perfect knockout range to get an early chilling Nay boost on that Pokemon. You still have to be careful with how you approach this next turn, as Aurelien does have Fake Out available thanks to that Iron Hands, but that is a very safe play to go for after you protect and stall out the turn.
All right, well, Fluttermane is going to switch out. Aurelien is preserving all of their options and resources so far. Switching out the low health Grimmsnarl, switching out the low health Fluttermane. Patrick is also going to reposition here, choosing to retreat the Rillaboom in favor of the Incineroar. Now getting an Intimidate drop onto that Iron Hands and threatening fake out pressure onto that Choice Specs Terrapagos that has no ability to protect next turn.
With the Protect on the Calyrex, though, we won't be seeing any damage connect with it, as, just like you said, nothing's really happening this turn, but that is okay. With the Incineroar on the field, you can now flinch that Terrapagos, and now this Calyrex Ice Rider has its choice. I think you have to start stacking the damage onto the Terrapagos, as it is very unlikely to take out a Assault Vest Iron Hands, one of the bulkiest Pokemon in the format, in a single hit. But that Terrapagos, if you can get it within KO range, within Grassy Glide range, that is an option for you to take that win and to start getting into your opponent's head.
All right, well, there's the fake out onto Terrapagos. Fake out already one of the best moves in the game, even better against Terrapagos. That little bit of chip damage has now broken the Terra Shell, which means that Terrapagos is taking full damage from this Glacial Lance. Both Terrapagos and Iron Hands are now under 50% health before the grassy terrain recovery. Iron Hands was able to heal back a little bit, will be able to heal back a little bit with a Drain Punch onto the Incineroar, and may just barely be in range of a KO as well.
That was a critical hit on that Iron Hand, so you have to be very careful with how much damage you anticipate the Calyrex Ice Rider to do this turn. But the Calyrex Ice Rider is still at full health. It can take an attack or two from the Iron Hands, from this Terrapagos.
Happy to.
You just have to be careful. You cannot terastallize this turn, because as soon as you do, you are putting yourself in danger of that Terrapagos moving forwards. Patrick is playing in a very offensive way, but that's still matching the conservative pace that Aurelien is setting for the game.
All right, well, Patrick wants to preserve the Incineroar and the Intimidate drops onto that Iron Hands, one of the other major sources of damage for Aurelien, who will go immediately for the Stellar Terastallization. Terrapagos now will remove the grassy terrain on the switch-in here, so this grassy terrain is gone. Rillaboom is on the field. That means there is no priority Grassy Glide until the Rillaboom can switch out and back in. and now that Terra Starstorm is spread damage. Actually just going for the Dark Pulse though, but fortunately Patrick has scouted that out. The Protect will avoid damage from both of these attacks, so Rillaboom gets in for free, and the Fake Out has been recycled.
Patrick is just making correct call after correct call here. He is in Aurelien's head. Now that he knows that the Terrapagos has Terastallized, I think it just changes your approach now. I think it's safer to go for Trick Room because even if it is locked into that Dark Pulse, you have your own Fake Out support. You can stop it from attacking this turn. We've seen how much Glacial Lance does. Trick Room was an option coming into this matchup, but it's looking like it might be Patrick's win con in this game number 1.
Yeah, Patrick mentioned that the Trick Room was an option specifically for Calyrex to sweep. So here is Grimmsnarl coming in to protect Terrapagos. Aurelien does not want that restricted Pokemon out on the field and vulnerable to big damage. Speaking of big damage, that is not what we're seeing out of Iron Hands right now after an Intimidate. Just a pittance of damage and recovery into the Calyrex as Trick Room is now fully set up. For the next 4 turns, the slowest Pokemon are the fastest, and the fastest Pokemon are the slowest.
The interesting thing about Grimmsnarl, though, is that it can be trained on the slower side of things. It has access to the Prankster ability, which means if it goes for a non-damaging move, it will be attacking first. In this opportunity, I think Aurelien has to set up a Reflect. With the Trick Room on the field, with the Calyrex Ice Rider ready to go, you know that that is your opponent's strategy. Reflect at least will reduce the damage you take from these Glacial Lances and give yourself an opportunity to attack. But that Iron Hands is still within knockout range from something like a Wood Hammer. It's not as safe as Aurelien wants it to be.
And the Reflect is good at reducing damage from attack, but the Calyrex is boosting itself with the Chilling Neigh boost. There is some damage from the Iron Hands to try and recover out of range of this Rillaboom. U-turn though, repositioning, that's another switch. That means Incineroar comes back in, and there is a Reflect. And actually, there's a Reflect basically for Patrick's team, as this Iron Hands now has -2 attack.
It's stuck on the field right now because you don't want to switch in your Flutter Mane when the dimensions are twisted. And honestly, you never want to switch in your Terrapagos, especially after that Terra Shell ability is gone thanks to its Terastallization. Whichever Pokemon Aurelien sends in here is going to be taking so much damage this turn. If you send in the Flutter Mane, you can't be flinched by Fake Out, but you're going to be knocked out by that attack. If you send in the Terrapagos, you're going to be flinched by Fake Out. There's nothing you can do to stop that. Your best bet here is hoping that the Iron Hands can hold on, last long enough to deal the big damage you need to get yourself back into the game. This is a very risky trade for Aurelien, but it's really their only option left in this match.
Yeah, they are going to need this Iron Hands to be able to come back in alongside the Terrapagos to exert that Fake Out pressure and buy some time and stall out this Trick Room. Patrick has decided to finally Terastallize a Pokemon, and it will be the Incineroar, which goes for the Fake Out into the Terrapagos. So no damage coming out from Terrapagos. This time Flutter Mane will go down. Terrapagos barely hangs on here, so the Terrapagos will have an opportunity to attack next turn if it is slower than the Incineroar.
That's the big question, though. Typically on these Calyrex Ice Rider teams coming into this tournament, you actually run a faster Incineroar. It seems a little counterintuitive. If you're relying on Trick Room as a win condition, you want everything to be as slow as possible, so you know you are moving first in this situation. But we've seen the Iron Hand underspeed the Incineroar, so it is on the faster side, but it is still slower than that Terrapagos.
The Terrapagos is too fast. The Turtle has too much speed, and it goes down to the knockoff from the Incineroar. And with that, Patrick is in a position where this Iron Hands just cannot do the damage to the Incineroar, to the Calyrex, and there's still a Rillaboom in the back. So the local hero, Patrick Connors, about to go up 1-0 over France's best, Aurelien Soula.
I want to take a moment to talk about the timing and the positioning from Patrick in that matchup, because that trick room that he went for, there were still 2 turns left on the clock for that Calyrex to attack. So yes, the Iron Hands was able to flinch it for one of those turns, but knowing that you still had that time, you guaranteed your win condition at that point, because if you, worst case scenario, you force your opponent to go for a double protect, but that wasn't even an option for the Assault Vest on the Iron Hands. It was a very calculated approach to this game, recognizing that initially you want to get the big damage down onto these Pokemon to threaten KOs with Glacial Lance to give yourself that option as an end game, and then able to pivot, able to use Fake Out just as well as Aurelien to get that Calyrex Ice Rider all set up and ready to go.
And I love your shout out at the start of this set to pressure the Grimmsnarl. We saw that happen about halfway through that match, that the Grimmsnarl was able to finally get a Reflect up, and if that Reflect had been able to be up for 3 or 4 turns prior, this would be an entirely different match. It would have been much more difficult for Patrick to break through Aurelien's defense. But because of Patrick's smart choice of leads, leading the Fake Out pressure from Rillaboom, as well as some powerful damage from that Booster Energy Raging Bolt, Grimmsnarl was on the back foot that entire game and just had to find a way back in to get off one screen.
And that's the most difficult thing about Grimmsnarl, is that you want to lead it, you want to have it on the field, and you have to find the best way to support it. So Aurelien's adjustment here, leading the Terapagos next to the Grimmsnarl, is forcing Patrick to make a very difficult decision this turn. If you flinch that Grimmsnarl, you stop a screen from being set up, you stop the threat of potentially even a Thunder Wave or a Foul Play as well, but the Terapagos can go on the offensive almost immediately. That is a much higher cost to pay for Patrick this turn.
Yeah, the Moonblast from Fluttermane was pretty powerful into the Raging Bolt, but it has nothing on the power of a Choice Specs Terapagos. Patrick has to decide which Pokemon he thinks is the bigger threat right now. He will start by protecting Calyrex. That is the key piece, at least in this early game, for Patrick. But Aurelien makes the call this time around. Big damage from the Choice Specs Terra Starstorm into the Incineroar. Now, Patrick will be able to reduce the damage of that Terapagos for a little bit. That is going to be the parting shot, allowing to reposition. And Grimmsnarl hasn't gone yet.
Grimmsnarl has not gone yet, which means that Aurelien had to use Foul Play. Could target the Rillaboom here, anticipating the protect from the Calyrex, but also could have tried to just connect some damage with the Calyrex, assuming the Fake Out would have gone into that Terapagos slot. And that's exactly what we see Aurelien locked into. One strategy that we have seen time and time again throughout the history of the video game championships is the cycling between Incineroar and Rillaboom, so that you keep this consistent Fake Out pressure on the field. And Patrick has essentially found a way to run back the previous turn once again, but with a special attack drop on that Terapagos, which means it has to Terrasilize this turn. But that's not the Terapagos, that's actually the Grimmsnarl Terrasalizing into a Ghost-type Pokemon!
Oh yeah, you like to Fake Out Grimmsnarl? You can't Fake Out Ghost Grimmsnarl. Sorry, Rillaboom, but you're not stopping anything this turn. There's a Terra Starstorm coming out from Aurelien's Terapagos. It connects onto the Calyrex, and there's the Foul Play. Aurelien, what did you do? How did you catch that? Calyrex has gone down.
Calyrex was so central to Patrick's strategy in all the matches we've seen from him so far this weekend. Its presence on the field demands respect. And Aurelien, realizing that the Fake Out was definitely going into that Grimmsnarl after the special attack drop on that Terapagos, knowing that all the Grimmsnarl needed was just a little bit of extra damage. Foul Play uses its target's attack against it for that damage. That was an incredible read from Aurelien, showcasing that just like Patrick, they are in their opponent's head.
I love that Terrasilization so much. Whenever you play against a Terapagos team, you always say, I know you're going to Terrasilize your Terapagos at some point, so even though I see Ghost Terra on your team sheet, I don't think you're actually going to do it. Well, Aurelien actually did it. And now Terapagos, still with Terra Shell intact, is able to switch out for the Fluttermane. So now that the Calyrex is down, there is no risk of any Trick Rooms for the future, and Grimmsnarl can start setting up those screens, starting with the light screen.
Prioritizing the light screen here does mean that the Raging Bolt will be weakened.
Yeah, maybe you want to reflect there.
Yeah, but true. But I do think that the Raging Bolt is really the main Pokemon that Patrick has to rely on from this point out. Has not terrestrialized yet, and Raging Bolt has a great defensive Terra typing with Fairy, and you know that the Terrapagos can't then turn your own terrestrialization against you anymore. So Patrick is pretty safe to terrestrialize into a Fairy type Pokemon, though. I gotta say, the Rillaboom also must be very tempted right now to terrestrialize away from its Fire type weakness, given that Chi-Yu, yet another adjustment from Aurelien.
Yeah, the Chi-Yu and the Fluttermane making an appearance together on these finals. Rillaboom not going to terrestrialize, instead will retreat, pivoting into the Incineroar. Now the Incineroar is usually happy to tank attacks from either the Chi-Yu or the Fluttermane, but has taken quite a bit of damage from that Terra Starstorm earlier. The Fluttermane,
that's a critical hit!
The one-hit KO with the Beads of Ruin buff from the Chi-Yu, picks up a one-hit KO, and that's 2 KOs. Chi-Yu following up right alongside with that overheat.
You can see exactly why Fluttermane and Chi-Yu have been the best friends forever in the Scarlet and Violet era. Aurelien recognizing from game number 1 that Moonblast would do enough damage to pick up the KO on the Raging Bolt with a little help from the little Chi-Yu, and that's exactly what we saw there. Patrick has a couple of options to get out of here, but they're going to be running slimmer and slimmer, knowing that there are still a Choice Specs Terrapagos in the back.
Yeah, Patrick showing off one of the cooler techs on this team, actually, the Terra Normal Rillaboom. Unfortunately, I don't think that's going to help this time around. The Moonblast plus a follow-up attack from the Chi-Yu are going to be enough. The overheat connecting, picks up the KO onto Rillaboom. And do you hear that siren? I think we're going to a game 3.
I think you might be a little bit early on the siren call, but you're absolutely right. When the players are ready, we will be going into a game 3. And what an incredible momentum shift from Aurelien in that game number 2. I think utilizing the fact that Patrick focused in on that Grimmsnarl to stop screens in their favor. Used Grimmsnarl to pick up that knockout onto the opposing Calyrex Ice Rider, and that's why it's so cool to see Pokemon like Grimmsnarl doing well. You can have a defensive Pokemon with foul play, deal tons of damage, and help you out of tough positions. Grimmsnarl's most valuable move was not a screen, it was foul play.
You know what they say about the best offense being a good defense? Well, sometimes the best defense is a good offense. If Grimmsnarl can just take off a threat like Calyrex off the field, then who needs Reflect until later? Who needs Light Screen? Take the threats off the field. That's exactly what Aurelien said that they wanted to do. An aggressive play from an aggressive player from a region not as known for the most aggressive plays.
Yeah, the European region typically has a lot of slow play, a lot of defensive style, and I think that's what makes this Grimmsnarl so unique. It fits into both those definitions, and I think that Aurelien has to match the aggression that we saw from Patrick in game number 1 and has shown us that they can. It was a very close match at first, but Aurelien just able to jump ahead leaps and bounds when securing the KO on the Calyrex Ice Rider, which does beg the question of how do these players adjust now that we do have a game 3 on our hands.
Yeah, this game 3 is going to be fascinating. Both of these players want to get in each other's heads. Now they have 2 games worth of data to sift through.
I know, and if you think about it as well, the Grimmsnarl going for that ghost type terrestrialization has to be on the forefront of Patrick's mind as they approach this matchup, because if they think that the terrestrialization is going to happen and they guess wrong and they go for that fake out into that spot and then it misses, that's going to be very difficult. I don't think there's going to be much of an adjustment from either of these trainers on the field, but in their heads, I think we're looking at a very different game.
Absolutely. These may be the same leads, but you have to imagine the gears are turning for both of our players. Aurelien especially showing a tendency and a willingness to terrestrialize the Grimmsnarl means that Patrick actually feels safe to terrestrialize in front of a Terrapagos.
This is such a risky play for Patrick, because if he called this wrong, if his opponent goes to terrestrialize the Terrapagos here, a super effective Terra Starstorm is all that they will need to secure that KO. But because the Calyrex Ice Rider terrestrialized first, this does mean that there is no terrestrialization from the Terrapagos on Aurelien's side this field, and in fact, no terrestrialization at all.
And no super effective damage coming out from the foul play from this Grimmsnarl. Instead, Terrapagos flinches, the foul play comes through into the Calyrex, does less than 50% damage, and Calyrex broke the Terra Shell with the fake out. Glacial Lance into both of those Pokemon, putting them into KO range for one more Glacial Lance. But still potentially vulnerable to a Terra Stellar, Terra Starstorm.
Vulnerable to a Terra Stellar, Terra Starstorm, and that Grimmsnarl has a little bit more health than it did last time. It's possible that a Grassy Glide would not do enough damage to pick up the KO there, at which point Grimmsnarl could use Reflect and then ensure that the Terrapagos will have the opportunity to go for these terrestrialized Terra Starstorms, as that Terrapagos just locks into that terrestrialization now that the Calyrex Ice Rider has as well.
And that Terraform Zero also means there will be no more priority Grassy Glides, removing the terrain from the field. Patrick, extremely on the back foot here, has to protect the Calyrex, and now Grimmsnarl is able to start setting the screens. Reflect is first, facing down the Rillaboom and the Calyrex, and here comes a big Choice Specs boosted Terra Stellar, Terra Starstorm into the Rillaboom, deals about 50% damage to that Pokemon, a little bit less, as Patrick needs to reposition. A critical hit gets a little bit of extra damage onto that Terrapagos, and every little bit counts when you're trying to break through these screens. Wow! A huge adjustment from Patrick, bringing out the Pelipper. And for those of you at home who are wondering why this crowd is going crazy for a Pelican, Pelipper has Wide Guard, which means that Terra Starstorm that Aurelien has just locked into is useless.
So many trainers will put off the terrestrialization on their Terrapagos, knowing that a single target Terra Starstorm cannot be blocked by Wide Guard. But Patrick, turn one, shows the terrestrialization on that Calyrex Ice Rider, baits Aurelien into matching that terrestrialization on the Terrapagos, and thanks to a slower U-turn, able to get the Pelipper on the field at full health and use Wide Guard to block this attack.
Aurelien is starting to get a little bit desperate here. The Thunder Wave on the Calyrex to hopefully get a full paralysis in the future. This Terrapagos' Terra Starstorm is not going to do anything thanks to Pelipper's Wide Guard. And of course, Aurelien cannot switch a Pokemon in without it taking a big Glacial Lance. Patrick breaks through the paralysis, but does not pick up a KO on either Pokemon just yet.
That's okay though, because Wide Guard can be used again and again without penalty. You do have to worry about that paralysis. You do have to worry about the 1 in 3-ish chance that this Calyrex will not be able to attack this turn. But as long as Pelipper and Terrapagos are on the field, Patrick can at least slow down the damage for this turn. We've seen how much foul play does to the Calyrex. It can take that. It will break the Focus Sash on that Pelipper, but it won't knock it out. Patrick is still in a safe space here, but he needs this Calyrex to attack this turn.
I would like this Calyrex to attack, but I think Aurelien would also like this Calyrex to attack so that they can start doing something in this game. This Grimmsnarl's foul play actually would pick up another KO, but a no paralysis. Trick Room is back in effect for Game 3.
And remember, there is only the Reflect on the field for this Grimmsnarl. It can certainly try and sneak in a light screen here, but with both those Pokemon in the red, Pelipper and the Calyrex Ice Rider should be slower at that point and pick up the KOs here. Again, assuming that the Calyrex Ice Rider can attack moving forwards. I think the biggest thing that Patrick has to be considering right now isn't necessarily the Pokemon on the field, but the Pokemon off the field. What two Pokemon are going to come into this Trick Room environment? Because if it's the Iron Hands instead of the Fluttermane and the Chi-Yu, that could be a very, very tough spot to be in, especially now both Pokemon are paralyzed.
Yeah, these paralysis don't feel very Trick Roomy to me.
No.
A Glacial Lance picks up both KOs. That is a sharp boost on the Chilling Neigh, which means +2. This Calyrex has gotten going. However, Aurelien was extremely limited in their options with both of those Pokemon out on the field, and frankly, got about as much as you could reasonably expect to get. You have the Reflect Up, and you paralyzed both the Calyrex and the Pelipper. That is as good as Aurelien could expect for these final two Pokemon, the Chi-Yu, and oh no, is that a Fluttermane?
That's
a Fluttermane in Trick Room.
This Fluttermane has booster energy, which will take the opportunity to boost its highest stat, which I believe we saw in the previous games with Aurelien is going to be that speed stat. But even without that boost, the Pelipper and the Calyrex Ice Rider are very, very slow relative to these two Pokemon. They have a chance they can't attack, and that's what Aurelien has to hope for moving forwards. Chi-Yu and Fluttermane can protect, but there's still several turns of Trick Room remaining. You're going to have to hope these paralyses come through to open up the door for you to find a way to win this match.
Well, the Calyrex refuses to be paralyzed. The Calyrex wants this championship. Connects only with the Chi-Yu, but the Pelipper also gets the Weather Ball.
Chi-Yu is down.
Chi-Yu is down. There is only a Fluttermane. Aurelien has one Pokemon left. Patrick has all 4.
Patrick coming all the way from Florida with the support of his local community, able to power through the paralysis, and with a critical hit, takes the win and is your 2024 North American International Champion.
Patrick Connors, hero of the Florida local VGC community. Day 2 top 64 placements to his name, is your North American International Champion. New Orleans, this is where dreams are made.
What an incredibly well-played game from both of those trainers.